So I've asked a lot of people to speak at these, and I had a World War II vet tell me once that if I was going to ask him to speak, that I needed to speak. So here I am. It's great. And I'm not nervous at all. But I grew up in a really small town in Kansas. We had a Dairy Queen, stoplight, and Pizza Hut. I graduated with 47 people. There just wasn't much there. And I always wanted to travel around the world. My grandparents were really adventurous people. And I think, I think it's a genetic thing. I like to consider myself very adventurous as well. And so my grandfather was in the Army Air Corps. I joined the Air Force, and here I'm in Cincinnati now. But a few things happened in between that. So I completed basic training in August 2007, and I was assigned the job of cardiopulmonary laboratory technician. And at the time, I didn't even know how to spell that, let alone what that even meant. So I quickly found out that I was going to become a respiratory therapist. And I completed all my training in October 2008 and was assigned to my first duty station in San Antonio, Texas, Lackland Air Force Base. I was home on leave in December 2009 on Christmas Eve, and I get a phone call from my commander, and he says, I have some good news and some bad news. And so I, of course, asked for the good news first, and he said, you're getting promoted below the zone. I'm like, yes, that's great. I get promoted early, and that means I get to make more money. I said, all right, what's the bad news? He said, you're leaving in about 2 weeks to go to Afghanistan. Awesome. So I was 21 years old at the time, and I was a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed kid deploying to Afghanistan. And so I got to Camp Leatherneck, which was a big Marine base. There was like 20,000 Marines, which was awful, because they don't even like to shower. And we set up medical operations there, and very, very quickly started flying patients around. I was part of a critical care air transport team. I was the respiratory therapist on the team. There was also a critical care nurse and a critical care physician. So there would be 3 of us on a team, and we would literally fly around on the back of cargo planes, taking care of patients around the world. So I had missions all the way from Kuwait to Qatar to Iraq, around Afghanistan, on to Germany. I got to see the world. It was great. And my team was great too. My first physician was a gentleman named Phil Mason, and he was a good old country boy out of Texas, and so we called him Phil Billy. And my nurse was this crazy guy out of Maine, and he had this thick Maine accent, and his name was Scott Brocious, and he was old enough to be my father. He was 42, I was 21, so he was Papa Bear. And so I had my 2 gay dads. It was great on this deployment. And I, of course, needed a nickname, and my doc was like, Britton, you are big, you're hairy, you're stupid, and you're always hungry. I'm going to call you Sasquatch. I'm like, all right, I'll take it. So the deployment went really well. I didn't fully understand what war was. I was 21 years old, and I redeployed back to San Antonio, and I couldn't wait to get back to Afghanistan. I just loved it there. I loved the mission, I loved what we did. And so I redeployed February 2011 back to Afghanistan, and nothing had changed. The alarms were the same that went off. The sights were the same. This fine, it's like a dirty flower that got everywhere. That was the same. And the rocket attack alarms were the same. Nothing had changed, but I had started to change. And so it was about halfway through this deployment, and I started to become fairly angry. It was the same mission. We were flying patients mostly from Afghanistan onto Germany. That was our main mission in 2011. And I just became really angry with the US government of, what are we doing here? Why are we here? I became really disenfranchised with just the idea of war. And that anger kind of turned towards the civilian population, where like they don't even care that we're deployed. They don't even care that good men and women are dying on a daily basis. And then this anger kind of turned inwards, and I became really angry with myself. I really struggled to see the good purpose that I was doing, taking care of these critically injured troops. I became really kind of like a robot is the best way to describe it. I lacked emotion. I was like, this guy is like blown in half. Why would he want to live? And I'm helping perpetuate this terrible cycle of this guy's going to get home, and he's going to go through the VA, he's going to get narcotized, and he's going to become just a zombie. He's going to come home to nothing. He's not going to have a good life. His country has forgotten him. He's eventually just going to commit suicide, and that was the reality that I believed. And that's what I thought was going to happen to all these guys who were coming home injured. And so I came home, the shell of a man, in 2011, and I redeployed again in November 2013. So that was a great decision. And I remember taking care of two gentlemen particularly. One was named Jared, and he was a right-sided bilateral amputee. I'm like, well, he'll live okay. He'll have some quality of life. And I took care of this guy named Cody as well. And Cody had a really bad traumatic brain injury. I'm like, this guy's a vegetable. Like, what are we doing saving this guy? He's never gonna live again. And I transported both these guys to Germany. A buddy who transported Cody to San Antonio. His name was Chris. And my buddy Mike took care of Cody in San Antonio. And I remember getting this picture one day of Cody, and there was a picture of birthday cake, and I'm like, what is this about? And Mike was having birthday cake with Cody, and that was a guy who I thought was just a goner, and he wasn't. And kind of cool story, Jared, the amputee, double amputee, he's since become a professional bodybuilder, and he also learned how to play catch with his kid with one arm, baseball catch. So pretty phenomenal. But I thought those were just kind of one-off stories of like, this doesn't happen. And then it was, I think it was 2015, early 2016, I met a random guy in a bar. Our dogs were sniffing each other, and I'm like, hey man, like what happened to your leg? He's like, it got blown off. And I'm like, okay, like where? He's like, Afghanistan. I'm like, really, where? He's like, Kandahar. I'm like, when? He's like, 2011. Like, when? He's like, May. I'm like, wow, like, this is kind of crazy. And so I got his name, and I looked for some medical records, and I didn't see him, but like, I know my path crossed his at some point in Afghanistan. I was flying patients back and forth to Afghanistan, onto Germany, and so I know, one of my friends took care of him, or I was on the same plane as him. Our paths crossed somehow. And I really started to see that his life wasn't terrible. Will's life was great. He had a great dog. It was awesome. Digger. He has a great girlfriend. He has a good job. He's happy. Like, all those fears that I had of these guys coming home and just hating their lives were they were kind of shattered at that point. And so this is kind of a story about the resiliency of veterans and the human spirit. I did over about 90 missions transporting critically injured troops. I did 3 deployments to Afghanistan and took care of about 150 patients on the back of planes. And for the longest time, I just believed that that was all for nothing. And I learned very quickly that I don't get to define what life means. Only the person on the back of that litter gets to define what that is. And so I think I'd be remiss today, though, if I didn't talk briefly about a few of the guys I transported that didn't get to make it home, though. They were called angel flights. And it's the patients like Christopher Moon and Sonny Moses and Carrie Daniluk that are the reason we're able to sit here today. I transported them from Afghanistan onto Germany, and their family was flying from the States to Germany to say goodbye. And like I said, I would be remiss on this Memorial Day weekend if I didn't at least bring up the reason we're here today. So thank you.